Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and today I'm going to show you how to play Legends Untold. So Legends Untold is actually an adventure game that has multiple sets and multiple packs. So this Weeping Caves Novice set is only one of the starter sets available for the game. There's another one called the Sewers, and the idea is that you're eventually going to be able to mix and match the sets to have a more varied experience. But we are going to start with the Weeping Caves Novice set. The scenario that we're going to do today is actually the introductory walkthrough scenario. So this is a scenario that's actually printed with the game, and the idea is that rather than just reading straight through the rules, it's a walkthrough that is designed to show you the mechanics of the game in a way that feels more natural and more story-like to help you get the rhythm of the game. So I'm going to be bringing the introductory walkthrough scenario to life, and we'll see how that goes. So as you can see, it takes up a bit of room, but here's the basic setup for the introductory sequence of this game. We're going to start with, so this we'll talk about in a moment, but here are our characters. Just so you know, you can flip them over to have a male and female side, but we're going to go with like some girl power in this party because we can. So every hero is going to have a profession. They're going to have masteries that are marked up here. They'll have different stats and attributes that will come into play throughout the game. We're also going to give them weapons. So for example, our Farmhand starts with a rough bow, the Forge Hand starts with a worn axe, and the Student starts with a rough spear. But these things, if we do well, can be upgraded later. So you can actually have better adjusted weapons later in the game. Each character is also going to have some skills. So each of them has a weapon skill, and then a couple of other skills that are going to come in handy on the journey. So for example, our Farmhand is dependable and tenacious, as well as accurate with her bow. She has a bow-related skill. The Forge Hand has an axe-related skill and is also good at smithing, shocker, and caving. And then our Student is going to have guard stance with her spear. She's also traveled, and she knows things about arcane theory. So it is possible there are preset characters for you to use when you're just starting the game, but then you can also customize your characters and choose what skills you want them to have, what weapons you want them to start with. There's a lot of room for experimentation within this game structure. We also have the starter location, which is the cave mouth. You can see that our party is here coming into the cave mouth. This is the rest of our location deck. And then we have a couple of other decks that can be identified by what's on the back of the cards. This symbol indicates that we're looking at the obstacle deck. Here's the barrier deck. This is the adventure deck, which contains loot and enemies. And this is the event deck, which contains events. So our goal in this particular scenario is to find the ancient shrine within these goblin caves. So we are going to be hunting through these cards to try to get where we're going. These are in a preset order because this is a set adventure sequence that's actually printed in the book. So as you can probably guess, the ancient shrine is going to be a little bit away from us, but that's okay. The first thing we're going to have in this game is a scouting phase. So we've entered the Weeping Caves and we're looking for the ancient shrine. So all of these characters are going to use their powers, combine them to locate the shrine, and then to activate that shrine's power. So we know that the party is in here, and so we have a token to mark that. And now we're going to see where we want to go next. Now our party is going to have a couple of choices about where to go. So this is where we came in, so we're not going to go back out that way. But there are two different exits on this card, and we're going to get to choose which one we want to go through. This one, where you can see this light indicator matches here, this is dark, so we would be going to a place with dark lighting with no light. This exit has ambient lighting, and those light quantities are going to affect how we do on skill checks. They're also going to affect initiative in combat, depending on who can sneak up on whom, us or potential enemies or traps that we can run into. Before we can go anywhere, there's something that we have to decide, and that is our marching order. So the marching order matters when you take damage from traps and other events in the game. So one of our players is going to need to be the scout, and the other is going to need to be the guard. So the scout, we've decided, is going to be our Farmhand, so she's going to take the lead. And then our forge hand is going to be the guard. And that means that if we're imagining these people walking actually through the caves, the student is actually the one in the middle with the guard behind and the scouts in front. And these tokens are here to mark that for when you make changes, so you don't have to just rearrange all your cards. So our farmer is pretty brave. We are going to go through this dark exit. So we're going to move our party token to reflect that. And then we are actually going to decide whether or not we want to sneak. So this event deck is going to act as our timer. If we sneak, it takes more time, but it also means that we have a better chance of succeeding on skill checks. So that's a decision that you have to make on every turn in this game is, do you want to sneak? Because if you sneak, you spend more time, but you have a better chance of succeeding at what's ahead. If you don't sneak, you spend less time, but who knows what you're walking into. So we've decided we're going to sneak, and we'll handle the time in a moment. We're going to draw a new location. So now we've drawn the Oculus. And what we're going to do is we're going to overlap. See this part with the footsteps? We're going to put that overlap here on this exit for the cave. So now we've gotten a different location. So we'll keep moving this up. You have a lot of choice as to how you want to arrange cards, so you can make sure you spread them out pretty good as you go. So we are coming this way. And as you can see, we're going to hit an obstacle. So as we come into a new location, we're going to have to take a scouting test to see how well we did moving from one place to another. So because we chose a dark exit on this card, we're going to need to pass a skill check where we get 9 on our dice. And the way that this game typically works is that you roll 3d6 for most of your skill checks and then see what the total is. So this total is predetermined. But we get a +2 modifier for choosing to sneak. And then, oh look, we definitely got more than 9. So we totally kicked the butt of this skill check, and so our scout test has been passed. There are different modifiers for your skill checks depending on your hero and what their abilities are, but for us we rolled 3d6 and we got to add 2 because we chose to sneak. And even better news for us is that the total on these dice plus our sneak modifier is pretty big. So it's 11, 13, plus 2 for sneak, which was at 15. Our limit was 9. So since we have rolled dice on this check to hit 4 or more greater in this case, than 9, that's not just a success, it's considered a critical success. And it's going to affect us as we scout. So as you scout into a new room, that is where this readiness card comes in. So you can be alert, bold, or careless. And the consequences of running into different types of cards are different depending on the state that your party is in when they encounter them. So we are lucky. We are in the alert phase because we are super ready. We totally killed that scouting check. We're ready to rock. Super alert. So it's going to affect the way that this turn plays out as we move into a new location. Now that our scouting is over, we also have to spend the time that we agreed to pay when we snuck. So that means that this event deck is going to lose 2 cards. 1, 2. So we have event cards discard pile. We do discard them face down. So one thing that's interesting about this Oculus location is it has several icons that are going to show you what's there. So here we have an obstacle, and what that means is that we're going to have to pass an obstacle test to enter this location. But once we do, there's several things that we can do. There are icons here to indicate there's a foe present. There are also animal and fungi icons that will affect the abilities on different cards that you might have. This is a campsite, and this is where your party can rest and recover in different locations as you go through the game. So if you see a campsite, that's where you can go in and reactivate skills that you've lost. Your HP in this game, you're not keeping track of specific numbers. What'll basically happen is that you exhaust your cards and then have to get them back. So if you lose HP in this game, what that really means is that you're flipping over cards, you're losing access to abilities, and it also represents your character losing health. So here we go, we're moving into this location, and that means that we're gonna need to draw an obstacle. So let's see what it is. Oh no, a treacherous bridge. So the way that this is going to work is this is gonna require what's called a party table test. And that means that every member of the party needs to roll a check against this bridge card. So what it's going to demand is that we're moving Plus, we can add our grace attribute to the move roll that we get. So we're going to roll 3 dice. Each character is going to get to add their grace attribute to that roll to see if they can push it over the threshold. And then here are the different consequences for getting different rolls. The other thing that's interesting to notice is that see how this has a symbol with a -2? That is the careless symbol from the readiness card over there. So if we came onto this bridge in a careless condition, we would lose -2 to our rolls. So if somebody rolls a 15, one other hero will also automatically succeed. With a 13, you are going to make it across with no problems. With a 10, you are going to cross the bridge successfully, but it's going to waste some time. And then if you get a 9 or less, you will take damage and lose time. So the rolls that you get are going to affect how this turn turns out, and every single hero is going to need to roll and see what happens to them. So let's pretend that our intrepid farmer is going to go first. So she's going to roll 3 dice, and because this is a preset thing, wow, I wonder what she's going to get. So she got a 5, a 5, and a 4. And she's going to add 2 to her result. So that gives us a total of 16. So this is like the best result you can get. As we saw, right, a 15 or higher meant you found a good route and one other hero automatically succeeds. So what we're going to decide is we're going to look at these grace attributes. See how the student only has 1 grace? We're going to make her automatically succeed too, so that we reduce the risk of problems happening on the bridge. So the farmhand got across and did so awesome that she took the student with her. And then the guard, well, in our guard position, the forge hand is going to be the next one to go. So she's going to roll. And let's say that she gets a 1, a 3, and a 5, plus her 2 grace, which is going to give us a total of 11. So that's going to be a little bit unfortunate because, yeah, this says you slowly cross the creaking bridge. Between a 10 and a 13, so an 11 is going to get this result. So she makes it across the bridge, but she's slow and it's going to cost us a time. So we're also going to have to discard this card from the event deck. But all heroes have crossed the bridge. This obstacle gets resolved, so we can just discard it from the game. And one thing I like to do is I like to adjust the cards so that this one will cover the obstacle to indicate that it's been beaten. So now that we've entered the Oculus, our job isn't done yet. See this little faux symbol right here? This means that we're going to need to search the adventure deck until we find an enemy to fight, and then we need to fight them. So let's draw the top card. Okay, so this time we drew loot, a warning note. So this is some loot that we're going to win if we defeat whatever enemy comes up out of this deck. So the next card is going to be the Goblin Brave, except that it's actually the Goblin Braves because there are 4 of them when they're fighting against 3 heroes. So these enemies scale depending on how many characters you're playing with in the game. So you can actually do like a pure one-handed solo if that's what you want to do. So yes, these Braves, there will be 4 of them and they're going to have 1 HP each. So we are going to put out these little tokens to indicate that. So these guys have an alertness of 9. They have a +0 versus range attacks and a +1 bonus here when they're attacked in melee. And then as we talked about before, here is their health. So now that we're going to start combat, we need to make a surprise test. We decided to sneak earlier, which is going to be good in this situation because it's going to give us a +2. And we also get a +2 for coming in from a dark exit. When you come in from a dark exit, it makes it easier to defeat enemies. It makes it harder to spot traps. So we actually came into this room in an advantageous situation because we're going to roll for basically initiative surprise against the Goblin Brave. We need to beat 9 for their alertness check to see who gets the element of surprise, but we're going to have a +4. Let's say that we rolled a 3, a 4, and a 4, plus another 4, for a total of 15. That means that we've beaten the Goblin Brave's alertness by 4 or more, and that means that not only do we get the initiative against them, we have surprised them. Because we're coming into this combat with the element of surprise, we have some advantages in the first round of combat, which is called the engagement round. So that means that all of our attacks are going to have a +2 bonus, And then the goblin attacks are going to be with a -2 penalty, and then that'll change in the next round. So the way that combat is going to work is that ranged attacks happen first, which means that the farmhand will go first, then the goblins because they do ranged attack. Then it's going to be, so they are ranged goblin, and then our 4chan and our student will run in and do their melee attacks. So ranged goes first, no matter what, followed by melee. So our farmer is going to be the one who shoots first, and her success is going to be based on how she rolls versus how that's going to match up against this card. So you can actually like break your bow or hurt yourself if you roll too low, and you can have some critical hits or just strikes if you roll high. So let's say that our intrepid farmer is going to roll a 3, a 4, and a 5. Plus she'll get an advantage of 2. So that is going to give her a total of this plus 2, which is 14. So if you check this weapon card, a 14 is higher than a 13, lower than 15. It's going to be a strike. That means that one of the Goblin Braves is going to take 1 damage, but they only have 1 HP in the first place. So this Goblin Brave is dead, and there are 3 left. However, these 3 guys are going to get to shoot back. And that means that each of these 3 is going to shoot at the heroes. So each hero is going to get attacked 1 time. So they're going to attack the ranged hero first, and then each of the others. So now it's going to be the goblin's turn to shoot back, and their success is going to be determined here. So let's say this goblin rolled a 10. It's going to be a 10 minus 2 because we had the element of surprise during this first engagement round. So 10 minus 2 is 8. And as you can see, that goblin is not actually going to hit us at all. It is going to miss. So now we're going to roll for the second goblin. Let's say it's the student because the student is technically in the middle. So now the goblin is going to shoot at the student. So let's say the goblin attacking our student gets a 14 minus 2 for our surprise, which is a 12. What that's going to mean, according to this goblin's card, is not that our student's going to take any damage, but it does mean that the next Goblin Brave has advantage on their attack. So that means that the minus 2 for that this goblin has because we surprised them is going to be counteracted by a plus 2 because of the roll that this goblin had. So now our 4chan needs to weather an attack, and the basically advantages and disadvantages for the goblin are going to cancel each other out. So let's say that we got an 11. So if we have an 11, the 11 total is going to again be a miss. So we can attack in whatever order we want, regardless of the scout and guard stances. So let's just say that our 4chan is going to attack first, and she is going to totally kill it. She's going to get a 13. So since attacks can happen in any order, let's just say that our 4chan is going to be the next to attack, and that she's going to roll a 10. So the 10 is not what we're going to stop with, however, because remember, she had the advantage of surprise. She's getting an extra 2. It's going to take us to 12, and on this goblin's card, we have a +1 advantage to attacking melee, which is going to bring her to a 13. That is definitely going to be a strike. That means that one more goblin is going to take 1 damage, and that one is going to die. So now there are 2 Goblin Braves left. Next, we're going to have our student go, and let's say that she has a slightly rough time. Maybe she only rolls, let's say a 5. She's going to roll 5. And she will get a +2 and then a +1 because she's attacking melee. So that total is going to bring her to 8. But even an 8 is not great on here. What's going to happen is she's going to get the shield icon, which means that she basically gets pushed back. So she went for the goblin and it shoved her and kind of messed her up a little bit. However, this is where these cards come in to benefit you. So our student has this thing called guard stance. And what that means is that she can do something called parry and trip. So that means that she's able to change her pushback result into an advance result. So she doesn't do any damage, but she does give advantage to our fighters, to the next hero to attack a goblin on the next turn. So she's going to go ahead and exhaust her power. She's going to turn it 90 degrees. So that way we know that we've used it and she can't just use it again right away. But she's used it to make this combat go a little bit better. So now that the first round of combat is over, we're also going to check for something called morale. So see how this is 4 Goblin Warriors to start and then 0? This means that the battle will only end when all of the goblins are dead. If there were a number here, that would be the number at which they decide to break and run. So in some cases, if there's one goblin left, he's like, you know what, forget it, I'm gonna run, bye. But in this case, these goblin braves are gonna try to hold out until they are all gone. So we don't have the advantage of surprise in this next round of combat, but we're gonna play in roughly the same order. So let's say that we're gonna have our farmhand fire her bow, and then these guys are gonna attack with melee. The thing that's gonna be a bit different though, is that last turn the goblin brave got to do a ranged attack, but because there are 2 melee fighters and then there are 2 goblin braves left, that means that these guys are all locked up together and that the goblins are not going to do a ranged attack. They're gonna do a melee attack this time because they're both engaged hand to hand. So remember how our student used her power last time to give advantage to the next hero to make an attack? That person with an advantage is going to be our farmhand, and an advantage is going to be +2. So let's say that our farmhand is about to get a 10. What that means is that she has 10, but she really has 12 because of her advantage. So what that 12 is going to get us is the symbol that means advance. So she doesn't do any damage herself, but she passes an advantage on to the forge hand, who's also going to get a +2 to her roll. So let's say that this time our forge hand is going to roll a 7. So what that means is that she is in a situation where she has the 7, and then she has 8, 9 for her advantage that got passed on to her from the previous combatant, and then 10 because she's attacking melee and has a +1 advantage in this particular scenario. So a 10 is going to get us this symbol, which means trade blows. So if we're going to trade blows, that means that our forge hand is going to take a wound, and the goblins are also going to take a wound. So they're going to hurt each other. This means that one of the goblins will die, so they lose 1 HP, they take a damage, and then however our forge hand is also going to take a damage. What that means is that our forge hand has to drain one of her talents for the damage taken. So our HP, that's our talents. So we have to pick one of these to turn upside down and basically drain until we can camp and recover our health, and that means our skills. So let's say that we're not going to be smithing anytime soon. So we're going to go ahead and drain this card, and we can't use it until we find a way to undrain it. So we've lost a health and a skill. So now it's our student's turn, and let's say that she's feeling a little bit tough this turn, so she is actually going to roll a 12 on the dice, and she's also going to get a +1 because she's attacking the goblin melee. So that puts her at a total of 13, and a 13 with this weapon is a strike. That means that the goblin braves have died, they are out, and we are going to get to take this warning note as loot. So now that we've won our combat, we get to take the loot as our prize. So now we get to move into here. Our obstacle has been defeated, our foe has been defeated, and we're just chilling out in this cave. So there is nothing else to do except possibly camp, and camping would be able to recover this drained skill of our forge hands. However, this is the only skill that is drained, and we have to spend time to camp, so we're not going to do that. We're just going to have what's called a normal rest phase. If there were more stuff in here, we might explore before doing this. But for now, we're just going to rest. And what that means is this guard stance is unexhausted. It's ready to go again. But our drained talent remains drained until we basically take a long rest and take the time to camp. So now that our rest is over, we're going to take another turn. And we're going to decide we're going to have a scouting phase again. So this time, let's say that our forge hand is going to scout. And then our student is going to go ahead and guard. She's going to be the guard this time. So everybody's switching duties. So given that we only have 1 card left in this event deck, we're kind of running out of time already. It's pretty rough. So what we're going to do is we are going to choose this brightly lit exit, and we're going to decide not to sneak, because to sneak you have to spend 2 time, and we don't have 2 time to spend. So we're just going to go for it, go charging into the next room. So because the brightly lit scouting tests are easier to pass, we're going to go through this brightly lit exit instead of through this ambient light exit in hopes that it's going to help us out. So first things first, we're going to pick out a new location. Ta-da! Okay, so we've got the grotto, and here's where our little feet come in. So we are gonna have this overlap. We can do it like this, and then we'll push the boundary, I mean the barrier under the obstacle under there once we get through. Hopefully we'll get through. But now, first things first, we have to do a scouting test. So we really only have to get a 7 for a brightly lit entrance. However, let's say that the dice are not friends with us today. So we are gonna roll, oh no, a 1, a 2, and a 3 for a grand total of 6, which would mean that we fail the scouting test. When that happens, we go to what is called careless. So last turn we were alert and it gave us some advantages. Now we're gonna be careless, and that's not necessarily a good thing depending on what we run into. So we're gonna spend our time, and oh no, that was the last card in the event deck. And when that happens, you have to resolve the event that was on the bottom of the event deck. So what we're gonna get is a Mollog approaches. A goblin Moldog or Mollog appears in the caves before you. So one hero, just one of us, not the whole table, needs to make a persuade test versus a 12 with the animal kin specialty is what that means. Failure means that we get -2 to our next scouting test because the Mollog runs away. If we're successful, we get a +2 to our next scouting test because the Mollog will lead us onwards. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna see who is the most charming and then try to get them to pass the test. So our most charming person, well, these guys aren't very charming. It's gonna have to be the charming Farmhand. So the Farmhand is going to go ahead and roll, and she's gonna get a +2 to her roll. Let's say, however, that she only rolls a 2, a 3, and a 4. So that's gonna put her at 9, and then the extra charm will put her at 11. 11 is not high enough to pass this test, which required a 12. So what that's gonna mean is that the goblin Moldog is gonna run away, and we're gonna get a -2 to our next scouting check. This also means, however, that this card is gonna be removed from the game, and we're gonna reshuffle the events. So now, there's only 3 times until the next event happens. So the events act as our timer throughout the game. So now we're gonna go into the adventure phase because the scouting phase is over. There's an obstacle on the way into this room, so we're gonna draw the top card of the obstacle deck. Oh no, it's a trap. It's called Ceiling Crush. And what's gonna happen here is, so we are careless. What that means is that we don't even get to roll to try to beat the trap. We were in the careless condition, so we automatically fail. And that means that the person in the center and the guard are each gonna take 2 damage. And so what that means is that our Farmhand and our student are each gonna take 2 HP, which means we're gonna have to drain 2 of their skill cards. So let's say that our student is gonna turn over her guard stance and her traveled talents. And then our Farmhand actually has a special ability called Just a Scratch. So what I can do is I can flip this one to prevent all of the damage that I'm about to take from one source. So she's only gonna have to flip this one over, and that's the end of her damage. So now the trap is done, it's just gonna get discarded. So the Ceiling Crush just goes away. All right, so after some pain, we've made it in here, and this icon is gonna indicate that we have a discovery. So we're gonna get to discover something. So let's go ahead and draw the top card off of this adventure deck. All right, so we got a curiosity called Giant Mushrooms, and it's a party table test. So basically what's gonna happen is we can attempt to eat these mushrooms and it will go well for us, or if we test badly, they're bad mushrooms, we don't fare too well and we get sick. We're also now going to add a fungi token to this location to indicate that they are present in the area. So now we're gonna have to decide whether we wanna try and eat these mushrooms. So our student here has a +3 to her reason. She also has this read arcana ability that gives a +1 to reason for her current test. So she's gonna go ahead and exhaust this to add to her test. And then let's say that she rolls a 2, a 4, and a 6. So what that's going to mean is that 2, 4, and 6 plus 4, 3 for the reason and 1 for the ability, makes 16. So what's going to happen to her is that she's going to get to heal one of her abilities. So let's say that she's going to heal her traveled ability. She's also going to get +1 on her brawn until the end of next turn. So one of her attributes temporarily goes up. Let's say that our farmhand is going to try to go for this. She only has +1 to her reason. So let's say that she rolls and she only gets a 1, a 2, and a 6 for a 9. +1 is 10. So nothing happens, but if she rolled a little bit lower, she would have gotten hurt. And that means that our forge hand is going to say, you know what, let's not do this. I'm not even going to roll. So now the giant mushrooms get discarded and they're gone. So that whole thing is done with. So now that we've gotten through our obstacles and our foes and our discoveries, we're going to go into the exploration phase. So we're in here and we're going to explore. So what we see is we have a barrier in the room, and that's surrounded by a search zone, which is going to let us work through some more cards in this adventure deck, which is something we need to do. So let's draw the top card of this barrier deck, and we're going to get something called a Squeeze Ascent. So what that's going to mean for us is that we are going to need to take one of these tests. So we can choose to use Grace, Brawn, or Throw, or we'll handle ability in order to see what we can do for the next time. So if we succeed, we get these rewards in the green column. If we fail, we get these penalties in the red column. So only one hero has to take this test. And one of our heroes has some really obvious attributes that'll work really well for that. That would be our Forge Hand. Our Forge Hand has this caving skill, which also gives her a geology ability. And she can gain +1 to her brawn for her current test, or +2 if it's a climb test. She also has 2 brawn. So basically she can really, really pump her stats on this. And also her mastery allows her to roll 3, not just 3d6, but 4, and then she can take the best 3 results. So what she's going to do is she's going to exhaust her caving to get this climber ability for +2. She also has +2 for brawn. And let's say that she rolls and then her highest 3 rolls are going to be a 5, a 6, and a 6. In other words, she's going to kick this test butt because she has the right abilities to do that. That means that she's going to get rid of the Squeeze Ascent barrier for everyone, and it gets discarded. The other thing that's going to happen is that the party is going to move to bold on their readiness tests, basically their party readiness card. They're also going to spend 1 time because that's just what you have to do on this card. So let's spend our time and keep going. So now we're going to be in this search area and we have a choice. We can spend some time to explore carefully, or we can try to save time but be careless. We are going to be careful, so we're going to spend a time and then we're going to draw 3 cards from this deck. So here's a lute, a bat whistle, so we're going to get to keep that. That's awesome, so we'll keep it. And then we're going to draw 2 more cards. And so if we had not been careful, some goblin drunks would have messed with us. And we also would have had to deal with a spiked pit booby trap. So it is good that we were not just sort of carelessly wandering into these things, because now we can just get rid of them and they don't do anything bad to us at all. So now what we're going to do is, this is our rest phase. Everybody has 1 totally drained skill, and we all have some exhausted skills too. So in the rest phase, you unexhaust everything, and then we're going to decide whether to camp. Camping is going to cost 2 time, but we're going to decide that it's worth it. What that's going to mean is that we're going to empty this event pile. But we're going to camp. Everything turns back over. But now we have to resolve this event. And we're going to get a bat swarm. So, without warning, bats fill the air. Something seems to have spooked them into flight. And it affects locations with an animal sign on them. So if we're in or adjacent to one, which we are, we would have to make a test. However, we're very, very lucky because we just obtained this bat whistle for loot. So now we can discard this to ignore an event that requires this animal symbol. So we can use the bat whistle loot to to get rid of the bat swarm and not have to worry about it. So that is exactly what we're going to do. Now we're going to take these events and we're going to reshuffle them into a new deck and put it here. So once you run out of events, you're totally out of time. So working through the event deck is something you have to manage as you play. So I think what we're going to do now is I'm going to let you discover turn 3 in this introductory setup for yourself, now that we've shown you some of the basics on how all these elements of the game work. So as you can see, Legends Untold is basically a series of skill checks, and you are just trying to make the best decisions that you can based on the skills that your characters have throughout the game. So that's a little introduction to Legends Untold. As you can see, it is a game that involves a lot of skill checks. I admit I was hoping for some more story. There is a cinematic campaign that can be read around different moments of gameplay, but I was hoping for a little bit more sort of in-game drama and excitement. The other thing to know about Legends Untold is that, while the game is essentially a series of fairly logical skill checks, this rulebook is huge. So there are some little finicky elements of the game to make sure, you have to make sure that you are paying attention to what kind of tests you need to do, how the different abilities work, and exactly what triggers what when. But if you are interested in games with mix and match components and that offer, some story text and some campaign play, then Legends Untold may be of interest to you. Happy gaming.